Hey guys, it's Brian. Before you go ahead and do anything else, make sure you leave a like and subscribe and turn on those notifications if you want to see more content like this in the future. Anyways, on to the video. Hey guys, it's Brian. Welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh video. And so today we have an interesting video. So this is my round 6 of Sir EMANONS tournament. So this was a list that was submitted at the beginning of the format. So it's not my current list. However, these are recent in matches since we have to lock in our decks at the moment of the tournament. So if you guys haven't checked out Sir EMANONS' channel already, I'll go ahead and leave a link to it in the description down below, and also leave a link down to his Discord, where he does tournaments all the time. So it's my Invoked Dogmatika Shaddoll deck. So this is the same list that I had at the start of the format. I'll leave a link to that profile in the eye above. So let's go ahead and get right into the match. So I'm going first, and my opponent is playing Dragon Link. And so, as you can see, my opening hand isn't really the greatest. I have Droplets, Invocation, Beast, Ash, and Punishment, which is pretty bad for going first hand, which is why I started making improvements to the deck. And next we have our opponent that has opened up Nib, Safer, Lancia, Rocket Synchron, and Tracer, which is pretty good to start out. So I pretty much have to start out by setting 2 and passing. So my opponent draws a second Nymphoterm. And he starts out with the Safer. Links off into the Striker. I immediately just Ash it. And it looks like that was good enough to stop him for that moment. So I only take 1,000. And the reason why I Ash here is because I don't want him to go ahead and just have free cards to go ahead and just summon off of Boot Sector. And in this case, as you can see, he has 2 rockets in hand, so that would have been a really bad situation for my case, because he would have just been able to get rid of the Striker and then just summon out cards. So in the end phase, I decided to go ahead and Punishment here just to ensure that I get the Schism and an extra draw instead of risking it to go ahead and get a Shaddoll Fusion for the draw. And that way I can use my extra on his turn, on his next turn, because I will still not be able to use my extra at the end of my turn. So I draw a Nib, which is pretty good here, and I also draw into a Nadir. So I go ahead and use Nadir. I go ahead and send the Alistair link. And I use this because I do have Invocation, so I'm just setting up for the next turn. So I search out the Ecclesia. And normal summon the Ecclesia, I go ahead and get the Fleur-de-Lis. And after searching the Fleur-de-Lis, I just go ahead and attack for 15. And set the Schism. So he draws into another Rocket Synchron here. And decides to go ahead and scoop it up. So I was pretty fortunate that game 1, where I didn't, even though I opened up pretty poorly, my opponent also opened up pretty poorly. So I was very fortunate for that first game of that round. So heading into game 2, I opened up pretty decent. I drew Nadir, Alistair, Ash, Wendy, and Droplet. And my opponent opened up Quick Launch, Ash, Chaos Space, Chamber, and War Legacy Guard Dragon, which is pretty good. So he starts off by using Chaos Space. I go ahead and immediately ash that. But unfortunately for me, he does have the Guard Dragon, so he's going to go ahead and immediately bring that back out to go ahead and search for the Tidying. Goes ahead and links away the chamber for the Striker Dragon. Goes ahead and gets the Boot Sector. Uses quick launch to go ahead and get the Tracer out. Link away into the seals, and this is pretty strong for opening board, but I think it could have been better if you would have just started trying to go ahead and get into ruler, but that's just simply my opinion. So I start out, and I know for a fact that he has the chamber and the seals, so he has effective 2 bounces, so I'm just going to try and force them out as soon as I can. So I go ahead and start out with the Alistair. It immediately gets ashed. So I decided to go ahead and use droplets next to go ahead and negate the seals. And next I go ahead and use Nadir, get the App Clone to my graveyard to go ahead and search out the Ecclesia. Using the App Clone next to go ahead and get the Schism, I immediately pitch the Wendy. My thought process here is to force out the Tidying as soon as possible. So I search out the Hedgehog and set it. I use the Ecclesia effect to go ahead and try and force out the Tidying and to bounce back my face down. He decides to go ahead and not do that. I go ahead and search for the Fleur-de-Lis. So I go ahead and just try and go to the battle at this point. He decides to go ahead and use these seals now. And I decide to go ahead and allow him to get the summon off of the Tracer, but I go ahead and see that since he's trying to use Tracer, I immediately just go ahead and ash that. He uses Tidying to go ahead and bounce back the Ecclesia. So I go ahead and set the Schism and pass. So here he goes into his chamber on his standby phase, getting another Tidying. I probably could have that past turn used the ash on the seal, that way he wouldn't have had anything. That's just looking back on it now. Goes ahead and normal summons the Tracer. I immediately, as soon as he normal summons, I go ahead and activate Schism. He chains the Tracer to go ahead and bring out the Recharger. In response, I decide to immediately, just after being able to resolve the Schism, I go ahead and get rid of the tuner on board, which is the Tracer. And decides to pass, knowing that he has a Tidying face down. I go ahead and flip up the Hedgehog. And he decides to go ahead and let it go through. I go ahead and search for the Resh. I probably could have gone for a Verite play here, but I was kind of hesitant because I did sign out the Dragoon package for this game. So I decided to go ahead and just simply normal summon the Ecclesia and use the effect, the Fleur-de-Lis. Try and go to the battle right away. So he decides to put back the window, which is fine. I go ahead and just get in as much damage as I can. And then I link into the Ecclesia. I'm sorry, link into the Verite. And then with the Verite, I go ahead and immediately banish, which is probably a misplay on my part. I could have just saved it. to make Winda, and then I just have the Rush face down for when he decides to get rid of it. I'd immediately go ahead and on his standby phase to go ahead and get Lancia just so he doesn't get to anything important. Because that prevents him from getting into the, in this case, being able to summon the baby dragons and Levianeer, which is a way of getting over the window. So here he goes into boot sector, brings back the Tracer, and sets the Recharger face down. And here he decides to go ahead and do the same thing to me, where he just goes ahead and activates Lancia. Decides to go ahead and bring out the chamber as well, getting the third tidying. And here I misplay. I should have just gone ahead and attacked the chamber right away. But I decided to go ahead and try to go with Winda. And this gave him the opening, apart from the tidying, to go ahead and just try and come back from this. So he gets rid of the chamber, brings out the Synchron. And for his draw, he draws into the Ash. And at this point, I remember that he couldn't have made that summon for the Recharger. And it was a Lancia, and I was mistaken. So he draws into the Quick Launch, which actually may have been better for him. So he goes ahead and synchros into the Ruler. And here he mills Safer, Noctivision, Synchron, Lancia, and Skullmeister, which is 5 pretty good cards for him to be able to add, since he probably has already seen that I have been wanting to banish. He may just go for the Lancia or the Skullmeister, because Skullmeister can affect my recovery. But he does go for the Lancia just to prevent me from banishing on my turn. So here he just attacks into the window. And he decides to go ahead and let into it again. So I just go ahead and just try to go for battle here. And since I do have the nib and the droll here, I'm pretty confident in what's going to happen. And that even if he is able to go ahead and get past maybe another window, I'm still confident enough to go ahead and say that I can go ahead and out his board. So he starts out with the Collapse Serpent. Goes in the Quick Launch. I go ahead and decide to go ahead and use Construct here to try and banish with the aerial, but unfortunately here he was able to just go ahead and negate it, which ended up costing me a lot in this turn. So I immediately after he resolves his chain, I go ahead and draw him. And so he goes ahead and banishes the Black Dragon after he gets out the Tracer again from the boot sector. So here he goes into LP, and after LP he goes into Striker. I immediately just go for the nib. He decided to go for the third tidying here and put back my constructs since they don't have any Shaddolls at this point. Fortunately, it makes the token a lot weaker for me to get over. So he brings back the Chaos Ruler, just crashes into the nib. That way I can't get rid of the token. And I draw the Invocation for turn. And here I make a misplay. I was very fortunate to draw the Invocation. But because of the fact that I made a huge misplay in this case, I probably should have just attacked. And instead of making Mechaba, I could have made the Raijin. But because I did get greedy, and this is where you're gonna see I get punished because I miscalculated on how much damage it would have been in total. But because of this, I unfortunately was not able to go ahead and because if I went for Raijin, I could have just cut it off and not allow him to get into any of his more crucial synchros. But because he is able to go ahead and just simply with the boot sector bring back cards, he's going to go ahead and use Chaos Space to go ahead and put the ruler back. And from here, it should be game on the crackback. Goes ahead and brings back the Synchron. And with the Synchron, he makes into a Needle Fiber. Brings out the Ash. Makes LP. Moves it to go ahead and summon out Brotar effect. Gets the Levianeer and this could have been avoided if I made the Raijin. So he goes into the Boral Sword, and from here he just drops down the Levianeer. Makes the seals for added emphasis to go ahead and bring back the Levianeer with the Safer Engrave. Just banishes 3 more Lights and Darks, and he has a game from there. So game 3 is pretty interesting. I don't have everything that I need, but it's pretty competent, and with what I have and what's available. So he has opened up Levianeer, Boot Sector, Quick Launch, Cosmic, and Chamber, which is pretty good. And in my case, I opened up Cosmic, 2 Shaddoll Fusion, Wendy, and Call by the Grave. So I simply just set the Wendy, the Call by the Grave, and the Cosmic. So he starts out by going ahead and getting Chamber out. Gets the Tidying into hand. Goes ahead and searches and gets the Striker to go ahead and banish for the White Dragon. Gets into seals. Uses the white dragon to go ahead and search the Collapse Serpent. Gets into quick launch, and from here he makes Striker. And with Striker, he's trying to go ahead and get the Tracer back to hand, and I just immediately just go ahead and called by it. He chains his Cosmic to get rid of my other back row, but it's just a Cosmic of my own. So here he just decides to go ahead and set the Tidying Pass. And I was very fortunate to go ahead and draw the Alistair. So I first start out by going ahead and flipping up Wendy. And with Wendy, I go ahead and special summon the Squamata face down. Next, I go ahead and normal summon the Alistair. And search out the Invocation. So I go ahead and use Shaddoll Fusion here. He decides to go ahead and chain the seals to go ahead and get Wendy back to my hand. So I just go ahead and use Squamata to go ahead and get something out of my Decks of the Grave. Since I know he's probably going to go ahead and tidy me, he's using Brotar here. I just go ahead and get Dragon, and now just to force it at this point instead of having it do it on his turn. So he gets his Tracer. I go ahead and put Winda back into the extra deck, but because I do have here the Invocation, I simply just go ahead and make Raijin. Get back the Alistair and just attack for 22. He draws Droll, which is not that good. So he goes ahead and summons out Levianeer, and he tries to go ahead and put a card from my hand back in deck. I immediately just go ahead and set it so he can't link it off and try and get it back with another card. So he normal summons the Brotar, goes into Striker, uses Boot Sector to go ahead and special summon the Tracer that he had in hand. Uses Tracer to go ahead and pop the Boot Sector. Gets the Recharger. And from here he goes into Boral Savage. So he doesn't have any chance of going for game, which is really fortunate for me, and because of the fact that I have Alistair and Shaddoll Fusion in hand, I am pretty confident that I will be able to break his board. Especially with such a low life total. So my top deck was Droplets, and that was the best possible draw that I could have had. So I go ahead and start with Shaddoll Fusion. He's immediately going to go ahead and use Savage. I immediately just chain Droplet to it, negating the Savage and still allowing my Shaddoll Fusion to go through. I make Apkalone, using Apkalone to go ahead and just not using its effect, but just making sure using the materials to get stuff out of my deck. And from here I just go ahead and normal summon Alistair. He drolls me, but at this point it's too late. So here just go ahead and go for Verite. And with Squamata's effect, I was just going ahead and just dumping up the rush, making a Mechaba as insurance at this point, because I made sure that I would have a way of just following up with the Russian Grave. And I just go ahead and go for Dragoon. And from here, my opponent surrenders. So, anyways, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll hopefully have another video up by the end of the day today. So make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you want to go ahead and see more Yu-Gi-Oh content like this in the future. Anyways, see ya.